It was just another weekend or so, I thought. The kind where you lounge around the house, catching up on the stuff you've been putting off all week. I was flipping through a few emails when I heard the shouting. It was a familiar, almost routine sound in our quiet suburban neighborhood. But today, it felt different. I ran outside, and what I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. Two men, dressed in those ridiculous fake uniforms, green polos, khaki pants, and black shoes, were standing over my wife. She was lying on the ground, her arms raised as if trying to protect herself from the blows. Her face was covered in blood, her once flawless skin bruised and battered. The men weren't stopping. They were still kicking her, one of them yelling, "This is what happens when you don't follow the rules!" It felt like I was standing there in a nightmare. Everything around me started to blur, but there was no mistaking the rage boiling up inside me. You know, it's funny how you can go through your whole life feeling like nothing is ever going to truly test you. You think you're prepared for everything? But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that day. I'm Sam. And this is how my quiet, peaceful life turned into a nightmare that almost ended in tragedy. I'll admit, I wasn't always the most neighborhood-friendly guy. I kept to myself, didn't get involved in HOA meetings, and rarely interacted with anyone unless I had to. But my wife, Emma, she was the opposite. She loved the community, loved having coffee with the neighbors, checking in on people, making sure everything was going smoothly. It was one of the things I admired about her. When we bought the house, we knew it was in one of those ultra-tight-knit neighborhoods where the HOA was practically running the show. They had their rules about everything, your lawn, your mailbox, even the color of your front door. But Emma was on board with all of it. She loved the idea of having things orderly, and I didn't mind as long as it kept her happy. I kept my head down and life went on, but that's the thing about HOAs. They get power-hungry. They start small, with little rules, and then it spirals out of control. We had our fair share of incidents, overly picky neighbors, things like the wrong kind of tree being planted or a mailbox that was too far to the left. Most of it was annoying, but nothing that caused real problems. At least that was until they showed up. I was at work when it happened. Emma called me around noon, her voice shaky, but she told me everything was fine. Some guys from the HOA had come to inspect the house. Nothing unusual about it, they did it all the time. But they started nitpicking. Emma's car, which was parked on the street, was apparently blocking a mailbox by a few inches. Ridiculous, right? Especially since it was a street parking spot, but she didn't want to cause any trouble. But this time, the HOA officers were different. They were aggressive, demanding that Emma move the car immediately, threatening fines and even saying they'd have it towed if she didn't comply. Emma, being who she was, apologized and promised to move it. It should have been over right then and there, but that's when things escalated. From what Emma told me, these guys started getting nasty. They called her lazy for not following the rules, and they mocked her for not being more careful. I'll never forget the part where she told me, one of them said, "This is why your kind can't be trusted with a simple thing like a car." She didn't say it, but I could tell it hit her hard. It wasn't just the words, but the way they said it, as if she was beneath them. It wasn't the first time she had been bullied by the HOA, but this time, something was different. That night, I came home to a very different atmosphere than I was used to. Emma was quiet, distant. She told me what happened, but I could tell she was holding something back. We agreed it was time to put our foot down, maybe attend a meeting and speak up about how the HOA was overstepping. I made a mental note to do just that. 2 days later, I was in the garage when I heard Emma scream. Not a yell, but a real guttural scream that sent a chill through my bones. I sprinted out of the garage, down the driveway, and into the front yard where I saw them. Two men in those ridiculous HOA polos standing over Emma like they owned the place. "Emma!" I screamed, rushing toward her. One of the men, a stocky guy with a mustache, turned to me and said, "Stay out of this. Your wife here is getting what she deserves. She's breaking the rules, and now she's gonna pay." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. My mind went blank. But all I could hear was the sound of my wife's pained sobs. Her body was curled into a ball on the ground, and these men were still kicking her. I don't know what happened next. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I ran inside the house and grabbed my M16. It was a relic from my time in the service, but it was ready, and I knew how to use it. As I stepped back outside, the weight of the rifle in my hands felt almost comforting. One of the men saw me and froze. The other one turned to face me with a smirk. "You really want to do this?" the smirking one said, his tone mocking. "Step away from her," I growled, my voice low and controlled. "You've gone too far." The man in front of me, the one who had been yelling, raised his hand as if to make some sort of move, but I didn't hesitate. I clicked the safety off, my finger lightly resting on the trigger. I wasn't going to fire, at least not yet, but they needed to understand the seriousness of the situation. The smirking one looked at his partner, and for the first time I saw hesitation in his eyes. They weren't expecting this. Neither of them seemed like the type who ever thought anyone would fight back. They looked at each other, probably weighing their options. But in the end, the man who'd been the loudest dropped his shoulders, giving a half-hearted scoff. "We're out of here," he muttered, shoving his partner's arm. They walked away, still muttering under their breath, but they didn't make any more threats. I kept the rifle raised, watching them retreat to their car parked across the street. They got in and drove off, but I didn't lower the rifle until they were gone from sight. I stood there for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. Then I dropped the rifle to my side and rushed over to Emma. She was still on the ground, trembling, trying to sit up. The blood on her face and arms was hard to look at. My heart broke in my chest. "Emma, are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't say anything at first. She just buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I should have been here." She shook her head, wiping her face. "No, it's not your fault. They just wouldn't stop." I helped her to her feet, and we walked back into the house. But I couldn't shake the feeling of what almost happened. It wasn't just the violence that scared me. It was the idea that this had been brewing for so long. How many other people had they done this to? How many others had been pushed to the breaking point? I immediately called the police, of course, and had a long conversation with them about what happened. The two men were arrested, and it turned out they weren't even real HOA officers. They were just two guys who had taken advantage of the situation, pretending to have authority over people to intimidate them. Turns out, the real HOA office didn't know anything about it. In fact, they were horrified when they found out what had happened and promised to remove the fake officers from their roster. But the damage was done. Emma never fully recovered from the attack. I mean, physically she healed, but the emotional toll it took on her was something I couldn't fix with just words. That night, she sat with me in silence, and we both knew things would never be the same. But here's the twist. As messed up as it was, as horrible as the whole situation was, something changed in me. The rage I felt, the sheer helplessness I saw in Emma's eyes, it woke something in me. I wasn't just some ex-soldier trying to live a normal life anymore. I realized I couldn't just sit back and let things happen. I had to protect what was mine, no matter what it took. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just let the HOA or anyone else push us around. I was going to make sure people knew what had happened, that this wasn't some isolated incident. And most importantly, I wasn't going to let anyone else's power trip cost someone else their safety. The neighborhood would know my name from that point forward, and if anyone else tried to pull a stunt like that, they'd regret it. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a perfect resolution. But it was something. Something that gave us both a sense of control over a situation that, for a brief moment, felt entirely out of our hands.